Okay, in order to install the new heatsink, or the second version of the heatsink, this one right here comes in as a clamshell, two separate pieces, and they get screwed together on both ends here. The best way to do it is with the motor outside of the fan. So in this case, I'm going to be using a Het 685 kV motor. The length on this is a little bit shorter than the 590, and you guys are going to notice that this heatsink is going to stick out just a little bit on the back end of this motor, but that's okay. It just gives you a little bit more cooling, but these will fit the 590 almost perfectly as far as over the length of it goes. But again, 685 is a little bit shorter, so we have to just live with it. Recommend, again, you guys do this before you assemble the fan, or before you at least install the motor in the fan. Take your center body, stick the motor in there, screw it down just so it doesn't move around when you're attempting to align the heatsink on there, and ensuring that that it's going to fit properly. Just looking for a wrench. Alright, that one works. Okay, so it's on there good enough that it's not going to move as I finagle with the heatsink here. Next thing we need to ensure is that this cutout for the set screw is either vertical, straight up, or it's straight down, not to one side or the other, because that's how you have to access it. Obviously, the long stators need to go to the side, on the sides of the fan, not to the top or the bottom. Looking at the heatsink here, if you guys look at this head on, you'll notice that two of these fins here have the spacing between them is a little bit greater than the rest of them. That's because they need to sit around the long stators. You need a little bit of clearance there. So these should line up with the long stator cutout in the center body. So it should look something like this. Just center it up the best you guys can, and that's going to be sufficient to ensure that everything lines up, just like that. So just do an initial fit test here. And obviously we can see that the back end of this hangs over the edge of the motor just a tiny bit, but that's not a big deal. Okay, so that's not a problem at all that we need to be concerned with. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and get my screws kind of started in there, so it's not a total pain to get this stuff installed, as I'm trying to hold everything in my hand here. And okay, so you guys can see I've got a couple of things here. This is the heatsink paste that you guys are going to receive. There's enough here to one for each side of the clamshell, basically. You don't need a whole lot of thermal paste. You want the layer of thermal paste to be as thin as possible for good heat transfer here. So one on each side is enough. Once you guys squeeze this out onto the heatsink, just make sure it covers the entire inner surface, and that's going to be sufficient to get what we need here for transfer. I've got a larger syringe here, so I'm going to be using that instead. So again, the basic process here is this can get kind of messy, so I'd recommend putting maybe a napkin or something down, just so you guys don't get it all over everything. But that's what I'm going to do here in order to keep the equipment clean here. So we'll go through and just squeeze a little bit of it onto the surface. That much should be about enough. So again, really don't need a whole lot. Okay, so that's sufficient. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the music. Miss the 90s myself. Okay, so there it is. That's about all we need, folks. Alright, clean off my hand a little bit here, and we can move on to the next step of actually installing this onto the motor. Okay, so once again, ensure that everything lines up. Also, take note that the holes on one side of the heatsink are threaded, the other side is not. So when you put the opposite end on there, make sure that you're mating the proper surface here. One side should be threaded, the other side should not be. So we'll start with this side. Again, making sure that everything lines up. Do my best to center it there. And there it is. So that's plenty sufficient. Okay, moving on to this side. Now I'm checking to make sure that the threaded side is on the correct side. So this is the smaller set of holes. These are larger. So that's how we're gonna mate it. Okay. And there it is. Okay. So next step is to go ahead and get the middle screws in there first. Once you get it semi-tightened, kind of where you guys need it, then we can start messing with the other side. Also, I recommend using wrenches that have this cut out at the tip, and that will allow you guys to go into this at an angle, which will make it easier. You guys can use just a regular straight wrench as well, but these will make your life a tiny bit easier. So at this point, all I'm trying to do is ensure that this gap is equal to that gap. Okay, so once again, just making sure that it's centered up. Looks like it is. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down to a point where I can ensure that the width in this gap is about the same. So I need to tighten this side a little bit more. And you guys can use some tension on this because it will give, and you can see some of the thermal paste squeezing out right here. That's a good sign. That means we're getting good contact on the surface of the motor. So at this point, just need to go ahead and do the same thing with the other 3 screws, and this will be complete. So let me go ahead and get that done, and we'll be back after that. Okay guys, here it is, semi-assembled. I've tightened all the screws down. All of them should be about the same level of torque, and again, this gap should be about the same as this gap. And you guys are definitely going to notice all of the thermal paste, or some of it, squeezing out when that happens. So again, that is a good sign, and that ensures that we have very good contact between the heatsink and the motor surface. So let's go ahead and take the front end off here, or the center body, since we don't need it any longer. And again, notice that thermal paste squeezing out the front as well. Okay, so there it is. That's the heatsink on that motor, ready to be installed.